I want to welcome you here today. My name is Jane Conway, and I had the privilege of going to Africa with the Uganda Possibilities Project from this church and Widow's Garden Project from Living Hope Church. And that church also has another member who was not able to come today. He's been away for 6 weeks, I think, Karis. It's Micah Smith, the pastor of that church, and they wanted him to come and preach after being away for 6 weeks. So we are missing Micah, and we're also missing Rob Benson. He had some family things to do. So we are a team of 9, led by David Moore, and I would like to introduce him shortly. I'll give you a little idea of the flow of the day. Sorry, it'll be about 40 minutes, not a full day. Africa time, though, it might take longer. So in a moment, we're going to do an African welcome. So you'll see the team members that are here, and they'll be up at the front singing Tu Contenderesa. And that so people in the audience will recognize, because I see a lot of faces here, people who have been on previous trips. So please sing along with us, because it'll be up there. After the welcome, each member will speak for a few minutes and introduce the next. As this is the first time we have met since being together, I can only guess it'll take 40 minutes, Africa time. But we are very excited to share with you our friends, our family, and visitors, and many of you who have supported both in prayer and financially. That's been a really big thing that God has multiplied. What we've done in this valley has extended into Uganda. I will introduce David Moore now. He will speak after the Tu Contendera. That's just for flow, right? You like things to go fast. So David Moore first offered to take Desmond and I to Africa 25 years ago. And as he is a man of his word, 2 COVID cancellations could not stop him. David has worked for over 50 years in Africa and different countries of Africa. In 1968, David started working in Burundi. That lasted 5 years. He was hooked. He has worked in Lesotho, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda, having led 21 trips with other people, including his family twice. He's been to Africa 27 times. And fortunately, he's come home 27. It's no wonder that he does not only care for the people, he knows what their needs are and how to meet these. There was a lot of planning that went into this trip beforehand, and that was obvious because things went so smoothly. I don't believe there would have been another better person to coordinate this trip, and I'm so glad that he waited 25 years for Desmond and I. And I'd like to invite the team up, please, to welcome with Tu Contenderesa. And you'll see, after the presentation, a little movie, and you'll see how excited people were. We got lots of practice with this, because we could always join the chorus.
This song was born in the East African revival that swept through Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, about 6 decades ago. And it's still sung with a lot of gusto in churches in Uganda and these places today. So we would like, in our own fumbling way, attempt to do it for you. Tu Contenderesa Yesu, Yesu only wana wendiga, o musai uneziza, nevaza o molokozi. Tu Contenderesa Yesu, Yesu only wana wendiga, o musai uneziza, nevaza o molokozi. Thank you for welcoming us here today. And this isn't the first time I've stood in front of Bay Community Church and talked about this project. And Actually, I see some faces here of people who've been to the project with us. And could I ask you to stand briefly, very briefly? So there's a lot of depth to this project. It's 9 years old. And Living Hope Church, the Little Red Church at Comox Avenue, is the sponsor of the project. And I'm the volunteer project officer, although I attend another church, St. Peter's Anglican Church. So it's confusing, but it works. And I'm so grateful to Living Hope, and I'm grateful to the Bay community, because when Marvin and Pearl came back in 2018 from their visit to the project, you welcomed their notion of founding the Uganda Possibilities Project. And while Living Hope is winding down, you are just getting started. And I do appreciate the knowledge that that community is going to be assisted in future and visited, I hope, by teams from this church too. The whole heart of this project is simply to give widows a chance to reach food security for their children. Now, a widow in this part of the world has lost her husband, but also she's lost her land, because often the medical bills and the long convalescence of the husband has drained the family resources, and they'd have to get rid of their land. They've had to sell their plots of land. And so these people are beggars. And there are many of them. I don't know quite why there are so many of these widows. But AIDS had a part to play, and women just live longer than men. Many of them are grandmothers raising grandchildren, because strangely, the middle generation has just flown the coop and abandoned their children to the grandmother. And some of these grandmothers receive orphans from other families. It's as if they recognize they are the last line of defense, the social network, the only thing that can actually care for these orphans. And when we asked a group of them that had been established for some 7 or 8 years, how many of you are caring for 8 children or more, 75 of them put up their hands. And many of them were ancient people in Ugandan terms. So it's a very great honor and a privilege to be able to assist them. And I'm grateful to all the people who have helped us to do that over these 9 years. So the key to this is that each widow gets enough land so that she can feed her children, save some seeds for replanting, and sell part of the harvest so that she can pay for the lease on the land after 1 year. 1 year is 2 seasons of plantings. So we give seeds, and these 3/4 of an acre to each widow, 3 plots to each widow. And when we asked them to hold up their hands, how many of you still have your 3 plots? Everybody put up their hand. And that was extremely moving to me, to be able to see that they had taken that so seriously. Because if you lose that 3rd plot, you've lost the ability to lease 3 plots. And then eventually you lose the 2nd plot. And if you've got medical expenses, or your children are sick, or you want to send your kids to school, you might lose that 1st plot. And then you're back to square one, begging other farmers for the chance to work in their fields, to be given a handout of a bit of food to take home that supper, to cook for the children that meal. So they are poorly clothed. They're clothed in rags. They are unwashed because they can't afford soap. People avoid them. They accuse them of having their children who can't go to school roaming free and perhaps stealing their own food. So they are the dregs of those societies. But as we discovered, meeting these widows, some of them who had been in the project for 9 years, they were doing well. And as they would put it, we are now people. People recognize us, as being viable people, and we're not a threat to them, we're not mooching from them, and we're able to support ourselves. And for that, I would say I'm very blessed and very honored and privileged to have been part of that. And so are you. You are part of that. And we're at 1,087 widows. Yeah, and the team sat down and interviewed 153 widows, which were brought into the project, which brought our number from 934 to 1,087. And that's a lot more than we thought we would find at the beginning of the project. I've had a lot of success in my life because I aim very low, and I have very low expectations of myself and others. And I sold this project to Living Hope in 2016, saying, okay, if we can help 360 widows, we'll have been doing well. And let's do it for 6 years. And then at year 6, we were about double that figure, so they decided to carry on for another 3. So this has been my last trip, and I'm delighted to have been able to share it with these 8 people. They get along so well, and they're very cooperative. And now I'd like to introduce the next speaker. Karis, will you come up here? This is Karis. Her name is Karis Cool-Smith. She's 17. She turned 17 during the project, or just before the project. She's one of the children of Micah, pastor of Living Hope Church. She's very mature, and it was easy to get along with her. Harder for a 17-year-old person to be with 8 adults. She's the only person under 50.
But 17 to 77.
She did great. And it was a treat to see her relate to babies. She loved babies. Babies loved her. They fell asleep on her. And not only babies, but dogs and cats. And generally people. So with that, I'd like to just pass on to you, Karis.
Hello all, I'm Karis, and I will speak for myself, and I'm going to share a little bit of my dad's experience on the trip as well, because he is very apologetic that he can't be here. While on the trip, I was also the creator of the blog that kept everyone updated, and I want to say thank you so much to everybody who followed along and commented and supported, because that is seen by us on the team, and it encourages us, but it was also seen by Ellie and his family. I came to say goodnight to him one night while he was working on his laptop, and he said, "Can you show me the blog and how to follow it?" So I sat down with him and I showed him how to follow it and how to subscribe, and I showed him how to comment, and he spent the entire night commenting on everyone's comments. He responded to Sylvie, and he was liking everything, and he came to me the next day and said, "We are global." So he was very excited, and he made sure to show all his kids. So everything that you say there and all the interaction you have with the blog is seen there. So thank you. Part of my dad's experience on the trip for him was preaching. So the Sunday that he preached, he had a translator, and it was Ellie's daughter, Fortunate, and I was so worried that his sermon would not be able to connect with these people, because it's hard when you're translating, and I could see her having trouble translating, because his tone, it doesn't translate well, so I was so worried that it wasn't connecting with these people. But we met with Molly, one of Nimlor, his mother, so the student that we met with his mother, and she quoted his sermon to him in giving us a rooster. She quoted his sermon and told us how much it connected with her, and I think that was the moment for my dad on this trip, to see that it did translate and his words were important. So that was his major moment, and it connected with me as well. I am sharing about hospitality. on this trip. And for me, it was incredible to see the way hospitality is translated across cultures. So it was completely different from what I would have imagined. And something that really resonated with me was any building, any house, any store that we walked into, the first thing we would hear was, "You are welcome here." And I'm not sure if that's just translation or if they understand what that means. But to me, it made me feel a welcome that I've never felt before. So we entered Ellie's house and we hear, "You are welcome here." We enter the church and we hear, "You are welcome here." We enter the school and we hear, "You are welcome here." And they say it with such gravitas. It was incredible. So that really, hospitality has a new meaning for me. The places that we stayed in Africa had just the most amazing people in them. So the big house there is the first place we stayed in Kampala, and those people were absolutely wonderful, and they hold a special place in my heart, and they fed us so well. And then in the top corner there, that's another place we stayed, the Rhino Motel, and that's the small little family that hosted us, and they were so excited to play with the hair of me and Chris. It was really cute. And then that picture of my dad is at the tombs that we visited in Kampala, and we were greeted by this man named Joseph. And this is another little story of my dad, but he shared with us the history of these tombs and the meaning of the palace that was there. And then he revealed to us that he was actually a descendant of the king, and he was actually Prince Joseph, and he has a book, and he was this amazing guy. But he gave us this amazing welcome into their culture and into their history. So those were the beginning of the trip and my introduction to the hospitality of Africa. The widows were also the most hospitable people, and they were just so happy to welcome us into their places of living and into their stories. And the way that they shared their stories was incredible to me, because it was a way of the stuff that we received from them, the information that we wrote down from them. It might be the first time that was ever documented. So one woman gave us the names of all her children on a small piece of paper that she would have had someone else write down for her. And we just felt like, oh my goodness, we have been given this woman's entire world and her entire life story, and it was just a very big moment of like, wow. And I felt so incredibly blessed to receive these stories and to receive these welcomes from these women. So that first big picture is the first group of widows that we met, and then the picture with the pink in it is a big church, and that's where we met the widows who had been a part of the project for a long time. And then the pictures of the widows sitting, that was the second or third group that we met with. The school and the children. These children were incredible to me because some of them would be my age and just so aware of how to interact with people. So these were some of the politest kids that I have ever met, and my standards have been raised. So again, we hear "You are welcome here," and we're met with this. The first big picture is their welcome to us, and they had like their scouts group out there saluting us, and then they had all the kids against the wall singing for us. And again, it was just such an incredible welcome. Everywhere we went, we received the most incredible welcome, and I felt. At first I had imagined it being like an intrusion on their space maybe, or like we'd have to kind of tiptoe around, but they were so happy to have us there, and they just wanted us in everything. So we were welcomed with open arms everywhere we went. The first small picture is us giving out kits to girls, and that was, I think, the highlight for me, because again, this is a super private thing that they're welcoming us into, and they were so happy to welcome us in. So there, I felt a welcome. And then that other small picture is us planting trees at the school. So we each now have a tree at the school with our name beside it. And even Ellie, our driver, was represented by a tree. So it was really really incredible. And again, just such a different kind of welcome. So they welcome you and then they give you a treat, which was really, it's a jump for me. I didn't think that that's where it would go. So this is my, what I took from Africa. I took their welcomes and how much they realized how important it was to make us feel at home and make us feel welcomed. So I thank them for that. And they welcomed us into their homes and their places that we would think is a harder place to live. And so like we were welcomed into a home that was the bare minimum. And we went in and we were like, wow, this is really hard. But she was so happy and so proud to show us this home that she had built. And then we realized that it was not so bad as we had perceived it. This is her home, and she was so proud to show it to us. So we felt honored to be allowed into that space. Thank you for listening, and the next person up is Chris Van Tol, and she was a highlight of my trip because she showed hospitality to the people that were welcoming us. So every single person that we met, she gave a big hug and she made sure to hear their story and learn their names. And she was amazing to the kids, which was also a highlight for me. So, Chris Van Tol.
Need these bad boys. Okay, good morning. Oh. There we go. You can hear me now? Okay, good morning. And yeah, those who know me know how much I can talk, but speaking in front of a group is not my first love, so I'll try not to faint while I'm up here, and I'm supposed to keep this within a 3-minute window. So I do want to mention that I have the great privilege of being the daughter of one of your congregants, Lori Lowe's. She's a great mom. I had always hoped that one day I could afford to join the Widows Gardens Project team. And I joined at the 11th hour this year when David Moore told me this would be his last year leading a team to Uganda. I didn't know who or how many were going. And once I learned that we were a large team filled with doctors and other accomplished professionals, and people with great careers, my insecurities slowly seeped in. What could I bring to the team? What was I doing? But God used some beautiful women before and during the trip to remind me that the love and compassion for people that He put in me was to shine, not be hidden away in my insecurity. Prior to the trip, we all read a book called Foreign to Familiar. It's about understanding the differences between hot and cold cultures. In Canada, we are cold climate, direct, sometimes to the point of offending. Getting things done is more important than pleasantries a lot of the time. Uganda is a warm culture. Pleasantries are more important than possibly offending someone, so communication is more indirect. That's oversimplifying it, but you get the gist. It's a culture flip. I noticed this sometimes when communicating with the family we were staying with. Someone would ask me for something on someone else's behalf because they didn't want to risk the offending me. And that brings me to talk about relationship. With each other, the widows, the students, Ellie's family, and everyone's path that we crossed. The team met regularly before the trip to plan and prepare, but we didn't have time to chat and get to know each other well. Little did we know back then that we would have plenty of time to chat while sitting in the van on our long drives between destinations, often on very bumpy dirt roads. It was a perfect opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more. We shared so many laughs in that van and at Ellie's home because we were blessed to have a group with a great sense of humor. We had a lot of fun ridding each other, well, some of us, being a large group of 9 and 8 of us spending 21 days together. We got along amazingly well, and I absolutely adore this team. I'm glad I got to know them all. It was beautiful to see how God used each team member's gifts in the project area. Even Dave Dawes' mechanical skills were put to the test, and he used them well. The part that brought me the most joy, though, was time with the widows and the children, and spending time to talk and learn more about the lives of many of Ellie's family members. We had great intimate times of connection in the home. Jane and I spent one late afternoon walking up the little mountain that Ellie's home was at the bottom of, with the older kids and nieces, talking and laughing along the way, and it was joyful to see they were enjoying it just as much as we were. Ellie's oldest son, Junius, was enjoying the beauty of the sun slowly setting and mentioned it was his first time up there doing that, and he lives like 20 minutes down the hill. It was particularly special to spend time with Ellie's youngest kids that were adopted by Ellie and his wife. They spent quite a bit of time with us in the living room in the mornings and in the evenings, and we would laugh and play. There were a lot of giggles and a lot of time little Junie's feet barely touched the ground. This was largely due to spending much of her time in Karis's arms. Everywhere we went, we were greeted by the warmest smiles. Even though the van window, as we drove by people on the street, they'd all be like, so excited to see us. The widows always greeted us with dancing and singing, and it was beautiful to see how much they enjoyed it when we would join them dancing. The translators would be, no, go, they want you to dance with them. And it brought all of us a lot of joy. This was followed by many hugs. Who needs a translator when you have a smile and a hug to share? They all just wanted to touch us and be around us, and I don't think they realized that it blessed us so much more than it probably blessed them. That we're all just humans wanting to be heard and loved. Opportunities to pray with the widows when we were interviewing them was very special too. Just having those intimate one-on-one moments as we got to know about their lives. To be welcomed so warmly by people who are living in the poorest circumstances was really humbling and very beautiful. And the little kids, when we were at the primary school or near schools, they were so curious and would come gathering around us, sneaking away from school and want to hug and touch us. Watching David Moore, surrounded by 50 kids or more when we were at the primary school, and bending down, shaking their hands while lovingly smiling at them was a really tender moment. And with the widows, like, you could see how much they love him and what he's done for them in Uganda. They, I think, refer to him as the husband of the widows, because Karis didn't mention this, but we had an opportunity, as David said, to meet the widows who have been part of this project for many years and ask them some questions, and Karis said, how many of you have remarried? Well, they just laughed uproariously because they're like, we don't want a man to ruin what we've built here. Anyway, all of this to say that doing is important and valued work, but the being is just as important, particularly in a warm culture. People have sometimes said to me, the money you spend on going on a trip like this could be better spent given to the people you're helping. But there's value in building relationship, in being on the ground and sharing God's love with each other, and experiencing their beautiful love for God as well in these hard circumstances that they're in. To build a better understanding of life outside of our culture and to bridge the gap. That's it. And I just want to touch on the menstrual kits that Karis mentioned. I think there are a couple slides about that. We did that on day 6 of our time in Uganda, and we visited a high school that I don't recall the name of, but while the men played volleyball and soccer with the boys, Lisa, Jane, Karis, and myself handed out 148 of these reusable menstrual kits. And the school had selected this group of girls for us. They were like cheering and screaming, knowing what they were about to receive. So we were outside on the grass, and once we had them all settled down with the help of the teachers, Lisa explained how to use the kits while the rest of us helped demonstrate to these very excited girls We had them form 4 long lines so we could hand out the kits very orderly. And these huge bars of soap they use in Uganda, that they were, once they saw the box of soap, they were, because as Dave mentioned, a lot of them don't even have soap. But before we could get to the end of the line with the kits, they just surged forward in their enthusiasm. I think Karis just about got trampled. They were very excited that they had a fellow high school student visiting. Yeah. Anyway, nobody wanted to lose out on getting a kit, and the saddest part was that we couldn't give them to all the girls. But these kits are life-changing. Too many girls in too many parts of Uganda and around the world don't go to school when they're menstruating because they don't have the proper supplies and proper hygiene. And it was so satisfying, and that was a really special time on the trip to me, for all of us to be a small part in getting these kits into the hands of these girls. What a difference that something that's so inexpensive to us makes in the lives of these girls. Right. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing Lisa Benson, a woman with a beautiful heart of prayer that some of you know, a beautiful person and an amazing doctor who I have the great pleasure of getting to know.
Thank you. When I went on the trip, I didn't think that there would be anything to do with health at all. I thought we were going to minister to people in many different ways, and so I was quite educated. So my topic will be health. See if it advances here. There we go. So we met with and interviewed widows from Kara Karinji, Chikagabaga, and the Iriango area who are not yet involved with the Widows Gardens project, with the purpose of bringing them into the project. And during the interviews, they described various concerns related to health, including violence against themselves and their families, food insecurity, poor housing, lack of resources to improve their situation, and poor health. Examples of health conditions they told us about were HIV, high blood pressure, stomach ulcers, diabetes, headaches, malaria, typhoid, poor vision, joint pains, and even elephantiasis. Some of those new to the project widows are pictured in the top 2 pictures. And then in the lower picture, you can see that we met with some widows from Rubingo, Chikagate, and Iriango who were provided with land through the Widows Gardens project, some of them years ago, and some more recently. The vast majority were excited to tell us about improvements they've experienced in all the determinants of health I just mentioned. They have the resources to improve their situation. They have enough food for themselves and their families. They live independently of partners who may abuse them or their children. They're able to access health care. They're able to pay for medical treatments. And they have improved health compared to prior to participating in the project. They naturally still have health concerns, but overall they're able to manage their health significantly better. So I thought I would speak on ways that this project has been able to support widows. And this, in my mind, has been in a few different ways. So through the Widows Gardens project, the widows have been provided with rent for 3 plots of land, which has made a huge difference to their health. The land provides that food security. It also provides income, which improves housing and ultimately leads to the ability to pay out-of-pocket costs for healthcare. Provision of that first year of rent for 3 plots of land is probably the most efficient and sustainable way to help with the ongoing costs for chronic conditions, such as hypertension, diabetes, and stomach ulcers. Team 2024 was also able to meet immediate needs for a few widows and their family members with the express purpose of improving their health. Specifically, the team was able to provide medical assessment and treatment for a woman named Beatrice Kahazaho, who has elephantiasis, medical assessment and treatment for a woman in Rubingo who has HIV and chronic nosebleeds, diabetic medications for 3 months for a few of the diabetic widows, blankets and sleeping mats for widows and their children and grandchildren, rental housing for a homeless woman named Marabou Tukamushaba and her dependents for the next 15 months until she begins to earn income from her 3 plots of land, and also eye surgery for a little blind girl named Daniela Ainasasis to help restore her vision. So some of those people are pictured there. So Beatrice on the top left, an idea of the mats and blankets in the middle, larger picture, the bottom left corner, Daniela, with members of our team praying for her, and then Marabou is in the bottom right corner. I thought I would let you know about some of the features of the Ugandan healthcare system. There is a health center level 4 in Kaboyenda, though it is inadequately staffed. Doctor assessment and lab tests are covered by the government, though prescriptions and other treatments may not be covered. Prescriptions can be purchased through the health center at a good price, but supply runs out very quickly. There are private pharmacies with large markups in prescription prices. Transportation to the health center is costly. Most women don't have driver's licenses or their own transportation other than walking. And specialist care is provided in distant Mbarara or even Kampala. There is a government-funded mobile HIV program and mobile TB program, which seem to function well. There has been an ask from the project area for assistance in improving healthcare in that region. It will be really important to engage with the community when deciding what aid to supply, so as to avoid challenges that have already been experienced in the area. Such challenges include things like the closure of 2 private clinics and 1 pharmacy that were previously established in Rubingo and Kaboyenda, but were unable to be sustained. Also things like the training of a nurse who was then not able to find paid employment in the region, and the training of a medical doctor who's having difficulty navigating debt and obtaining full training. Failing to consider unintended consequences of helping the community may result in the aid failing to accomplish its purpose. The good news is that based on Team 2024's observations, there may be an opportunity to help in a few ways in the future. Firstly, a shuttle service could be considered to bring people to and from the existing healthcare center so they can access health. Secondly, vision screening could be organized. This service has previously been provided by the UPP and could continue to be offered at the health center on a regular basis, such as every 2 to 5 years. Improving vision is cool because it has the ability to immediately impact function, especially if it can be achieved through one-time interventions such as cataract surgery, surgery for other conditions that obstruct the vision, surgical management of glaucoma, and provision of glasses for distance vision and/or reading. Thirdly, there could be partnering with the existing healthcare center to see how services may be improved in a sustainable, community-centric way. And fourthly, the UPP could specifically sponsor students in nursing, midwifery, medicine, and pharmacy. And these sponsored students could even be requested to commit to return to the community for a period of return of service, provided there's a guarantee of employment for the duration of the service. So that ends my report on health in the project area. My husband, Rob, has put together a presentation on education in the project area, and he's not able to be here today, so I'm going to show it on his behalf. So these are some more pictures of the Chigarama Primary School where we were. The support for education in the project area consisted mainly of providing 14 renewed laptop computers loaded with Windows 10, operating systems, along with a large number of tablets and smartphones for the elementary school. You can see these pictured in the middle photo. They augmented the previously existing computers, which you can see in the photos on the left and right, and the new computers will significantly help the already robust computer education classes at the school. In addition to the computers, team members worked with Ellie and local contractors to design a floor plan and a table layout, which will allow efficient use of all the computers in the limited space available. The team was also able to provide funds and help with the design for the tables and a custom-built metal lockup cabinet, which will protect the electronics when not in use. The team is happy to report that both the lockup cabinet, which you can see there, and the additional tables have already been installed as designed. In addition to what we in Canada would see as a normal education, consisting of classes in English, computer technology, math, etc., the primary school also boasts a substantial set of life skills and extracurricular courses. The musical instruments which were donated will aid the school marching group, which is already very proficient at advanced drill movements. And among other life skills taught here, the students learn how to sew, how to make water filters, as in this photo, and how to make liquid soap. In fact, the soap which the students make is used by the students and the staff alike on a daily basis for hand washing. Since many of the students board at the school, safety and security of the school is very important to the school leadership and the parents of the students. The team was able to provide funds for a comprehensive and expandable closed-circuit video system, which will continuously monitor the approaches to the school building. The team can also report that the security system has just been installed and is working well. And you can see some of the cameras by the roof there, and then the monitor that the security guard is using to observe the premises. Ellie is confident that the enhanced security and the new resources that have been provided to the school will benefit both enrollment and the quality of education there. Moving forward, there are now enough laptops in the school to fill the existing classroom. Since these were refurbished, they are fairly old. Some were originally purchased with Windows XP. Therefore, their lifespan is limited, and they will need to be replaced over time. If the UPP is going to continue sending surplus laptops to the area, the team recommends that these be originally purchased no earlier than 2012, with at least Windows 8 on them at the time of purchase. More surplus musical instruments would certainly be helpful in filling out the ranks of the marching band and would promote further music training at the school. I would now like to introduce Dave Dawes, who was incredibly helpful to the project in his role as a mechanic. And I don't know if he thought he would have much impact on the trip when he went either, just as I didn't think I would be functioning in my role at all. But it made a huge difference to have him with us. So welcome, Dave.
So I'm also a member of Living Hope Church. Just a little thing about my hat. There's a scientific issue in Uganda. You get to the equator. And believe it or not, when you stand on the equator, if you're on the north side, the water flows this way. When you're on the south side, it flows this way. And if you're right on the border, the leaf they put in the water just sits there and goes down the middle hole. Scientific fact that God has created a northern and southern hemisphere. It was a great privilege to go on this mission trip. And as was said, I'm more of a hands-on, so going to interview folks didn't seem to be very high on my list, but it proved differently. It was very, eye-opening to see the widows were surviving. When we first met them, I was the one writing the stories. My partner was doing all the questions. And one of the things that's probably key, every time we asked, one of the last questions was, what do they have for hope, or what do they plan for future? And I think without exception, most of the widows said they would hope that tomorrow is better than today. So in Canada, we may have long-term plans. They looked at next day. Could they have enough food for feeding their family? And just as a side note, when we've looked at projects that we need to do, these widows that we've just gotten, they don't get their plots until January or early February. They also then have to work the plots until June and July before they get the first crop so that they can pay. So one of my thoughts was, as a future project, or actually very soon project, we need to maybe have people sponsor those families. It's a $20 a month will feed them so that they can get a health into state where they can actually work the plots. If you see how they have to work these plots on hills, they have a hand, nothing is mechanical. And they're bent over the whole time like this. That's why they have joint problems and things, especially when you're in the late 70s and 80s and these grandmothers are still doing this. If you think about ourselves, how many of us can do it over 60? And they're doing a lot more. So that was my thought, that we could maybe supply some food, which the money would not go to the widows. It would go to the folks that are handling it, so that the money actually supplies food. Because other expenses would come and they might not use it where it needs to be. And has been mentioned again, many of the widows weren't looking after their children, they were looking after their grandchildren. As has been said, somewhere that middle generation just decided to leave and the kids were left with grandma. And many of them were 65 to 85 years old. And they were looking after as much as 8 kids. And one that we interviewed, she had, I think, 4 children, and she was also looking after her mother, who was 99 years old. And their house was falling apart. And they're in not a house, but a hut of 2 bedrooms. And so they have 7 people in a very small space. And as been stated, I was wondering what my job would be on this trip, but I'm more of a project guy and not on interviews, but God had other plans. On Sunday morning, as was described, we won't get to that picture yet, but on Sunday morning when we were getting ready for church, we were in a van that was a newer van. The whole team was in the van. But all our folks supporting us were in Ellie's van. And Ellie started the van and it quit. And he started it and it quit. And he started it and it quit. So I had to go over, and the church was 20 minutes away. And we were the main people for that church service. Micah had to speak, and we were singing and doing whatever. So the big thing was how to get these people to the church. And so I was able to, what we call two-fit it, and got it all the way to the church. And we got there with 5 minutes to spare. We were supposed to be a half hour early, but we just made it in time for the meeting. And that led us, we need to fix the van. And this was the van, by the way, that you folks donated. It was a Toyota van, diesel. Many of the vehicles in Uganda are diesel, so they last a long time. But this obviously is a 94, so it was a few years old when they got it. And that's when we were able to meet Pitson. He is a young fella in his mid-30s. His father was the local mechanic, and I think Dave would know that I think he helped in the past with their vehicle. But he had died through COVID. And so Pitson and his wife have 6 children, and he was trying to continue his dad's work. I started to repair the vehicle and then realized that there were many more repairs than the time would allow. We had 2 of the injectors weren't working, 2 of 4, so you're at 50%. There was a hole in the manifold, the fan belts were shredded, the timing belt needed to be replaced, and a few other, whole front end needed to work. But we got the brakes. When we went on the one trip, before the van broke down, we could smell the brakes coming down this mountain. And so I was mentioning in our van, I said, I hope these guys know how to shift down so not to do the brakes. The brakes were pretty blue and cracked. We were able to tighten the bearings and stuff, but that's all we could do on this trip. But Pitson came over and brought his 2 sons, 2 of his children, and I gave him my headlamp because it was already dark. And we were having to rip the van down. We got it all apart, and believe it or not, Uganda's a lot better off than we are in cell phone. Nearly everybody's got a cell phone, with good service. You can be 4,000 feet in the mountain, way out in the middle of nowhere, and they're walking down barefoot down the road with a cell phone carrier. It's not a fancy one, but it works. And parts delivery, if you order parts at 9 in the morning, 9 hours away in Kampala, the parts can be delivered to you about 10 o'clock that same night, back in. That's faster than we can get it here, and I ran a shop for 17 years. I couldn't get it till it was overnight, but they could get it in the same day. So some things, they're a little further ahead than we are. But with his help, we took it all apart, and then we were having to leave our 9 hours to go to Kampala, and we put all the parts in a big sack, and he doesn't have a car. He doesn't have a boda boda. By the way, the boda boda, which stands for border to border, in the early years they had these motorcycles. They were all 100cc motorcycles, and they'd go from Congo to Tanzania, so it was border to border, and they shortened it to boda boda. That's the main transportation, that's their taxi service. And most of the ones that run the boda boda, they just rent them. They're owned by some company, and they charge the locals. And you can see as many as 5 people on these things going down the road over the bumps. And there's no such thing as traffic control. Like this all right in front of you, and but they don't have many accidents. They do pretty good. Anyhow, that's the transportation, and that's the other thing that Pitson would work on, would be the motorcycles. So we were able to set up, when he went to Kampala, he was going to Kampala by bus and boda boda on the Saturday when we left, or the Thursday when we left. So he was going to go into town, take the part, take it to a shop. They would fix it the same day. He'd stay overnight, and he'd come back the next day. We would never get things done that quick in Canada. So he was back at the school, or back at Ellie's, within about a 36-hour window, and is able to put the van back together. And so again, it was running, and then I asked him to give us an estimate on the rest of the repairs, which happens to be one of the folks, I think it was Mike, actually said, I think we have a problem with the wheels. They were sitting like this, the front wheels. Yeah, that looks not too good. I was in the tire business, so they had just bought new tires. And I said, well, those won't last long. So we found out that all 4 ball joints, axles, bearings, brakes, all need to be done. But it runs right now. And they only drive at about, if they're lucky, 15 kilometers an hour. You can't go to 5 kilometers an hour most of the time over the bumps. So that's a future repair, and I think we've got it covered. But one of the things with Pitson, we were able to, he came forward wanting to have sponsorship. And we were warned about all these folks that would try to come and be sponsored for outside of our project plan. And we weren't supposed to accept a lot of the sponsors or a lot of their requests. But as been mentioned, others have been accepted, and we've been able to support where he can rent a shop. He has to walk. There's no way to get it there but walking, and it's about 30 minutes each way walking. But he will have a shop where he can work, plus supply with electric welder, gas welder, and a few extra tools. He reminded me of my days when I started as a mechanic. I had one little small box. And he had a small box he made, about this big, with a lid. All his tools were in there with a lock on it. And he would either have to call a boda if he did a service call. There would the box go, and off he'd go and do the work. But he made a lot of tools. So, you know, you break or cut a tool. He's a welder. And you'd make a tool accordingly for those vehicles, because the vehicles are, the tools I grew up with, you could get your hands in where you're working. In today's cars, as many of you know, you can't get close to where you gotta take the bolt out, so you have to modify the tools. And he had welded and made a few tools and pullers and things like that, which we used when we pulled the engine apart. So part of that plan when we asked him to come and do that, instead of me doing it all, was I wanted to see his skill level. And it was proven that, yes, he knew what he was doing, so we might consider his request. So that has been considered, and he's moving ahead. And he's also willing, this brought ahead of, Ellie was telling us about his future plans for the school. And he wanted, I guess he's been wanting to do it for a while, is set up vocational programs so that the students, I mean, education is one thing, but they have to still survive. So as we learned from one that we've supported, folks here, she became a doctor. But now anybody that gets an education, whether it's an engineer, doctor, mechanic, they have to serve for a year without pay. So how do they feed their families for the year even though they're a doctor? And these were things we learned as we were there so that we could look ahead and see what we could support. So with Pitson, he's willing to do the teaching for the students. So it's within walking distance of the school. And so we have been suggesting that that would be one of the ways the vocational system could work, is we move the shop to the property. And the students could come and learn. He's also a welder, and so they could teach welding. Construction is the other area. And electronics, and Ellie's very good at electronics. He could probably teach it himself. So if we were to have, they've already got the computers, but now the electronics is a little different, and it could be included with electricians. And so these are some future projects we would like to be able to see that could extend the practical aspect of the school. And now I get to introduce the Bensons. Oh, sorry. Not Bensons. Uh-oh. Mechanical work.
So Des Conway, also one of the group, and this was sort of like the third try that we finally got to go. So, but I'm going to try to be talking about kind of a bit about the future, sort of UPP, you know, things that have been done in the past. So people, as they have given money to the Uganda Possibilities Project, and to sort of show where some of the monies have gone over the years. So 3 of the widows over the years, other teams have come back and said, oh, this woman's house is falling down. And so then UPP and through Bay and some of the other groups around, we've been able to contribute some money for that. A few years back, they were desperate for some more classrooms. So again, some money had been put forward for that. And then also a school hall. And then we'll touch also on the latrine. So it was working there a second. So 2 of the houses that previously had been sponsored now have been completed, and the third's almost. So just to say, you know, that the money is actually being used on the ground. So this is kind of, you know, whenever you give something overseas or wherever, you get a little, it's nice to have the reassurance that that money actually reached the people that you were wanting to support. And, you know, you came in there and it's not a huge house, but you have to remember they live outside. So the house is really just somewhere to sleep, somewhere secure. So that, you know, 2 bedrooms, you might have 6 or 8 or 10 people sleeping in that. But I mean, all the other stuff, the cooking and all those other things, that's happening outside anyway. So, you know, the house might be, you know, I'm trying to think, it's maybe 15 by 20, so 300 square foot house. But that's adequate, you know, if you're only going to be sleeping in there. The school hall, again, that was one of the rooms that, one of the buildings that they needed to have a large meeting hall. That was part of the ministry of education requirements. They would have to have a large hall where all the kids or everybody could be in at one time. So the school hall on the left. Right now it's being used as a classroom and as a dormitory, but what we were touching on there about what David was saying as far as the vocational, you know, perhaps down the road we can build another dormitory and actually use that school hall as part of the vocational training. I mean, vocational training, we touched on some of the mechanic, electrical, carpentry, also some of the tailoring. Right now they've got the sewing machines outside in a covered courtyard, but you know, to actually have a room where you can be teaching the kids, because they do essentially elementary school, P1 to P7, so primary 1 to primary 7, and at the end of that, some of them aren't doing that well, some of them might be already 15, 16 by the time they finish elementary school, and they're not going to go on to further schooling, but it'd be good to give them a skill, whether it's sewing, tailoring, you know, carpentry. So that's actually something that really can be a benefit, because some of these kids finish primary or elementary school at 15 and they've got no real skill. They know some basic reading, writing. With the computers, they'll be able to do some class work, you know, with computer work, but you know, they don't necessarily have a skill. So to be able to give them a skill at the end of that primary school that they can use, whether, as we're saying, mechanic or electrical or sewing. So that's just one more thing. So using the school hall for that. Classrooms, that's the middle one. So again, they were needing more classrooms, so they had done relatively inexpensive build. They often have the offcuts from all the lumber. So the walls were just made with wood that were the offcuts. So, you know, the rounded edges on logs when they do the when they cut them into timbers. So, but I mean, that's a very, you know, adequate school. The kids are doing well, so you've got now 3 good-sized classrooms. They've only got, you know, 30, 40 kids in a class. Public schools are 100 plus kids per classroom. 1 teacher, 100 kids. That's normal for public school. So 30, they're doing great. Latrine. So this was the original latrine that was built for the school, for the Shigarama school, many years ago. So everybody used it in the beginning, and now it's mainly the girls' latrine. But you know, after 10 years of using an outhouse, eventually it needs to be replaced. So that's a project that we're doing right now. Again, one of the other things that UPP has been sponsoring is building a new girls' latrine, and they're also going to have like an addition for the teachers so that they can use a separate. Right now the teachers are having to use the boys and girls latrines. So that's going to be, you know, something that's underway right now. After we left, they've started to dig the new pit toilet. So that's going to take probably a month or so to get that completed. And one of the things that we talked about for the vocational, construction, you know, how they make the mud bricks, how they actually build. So again, one more thing that potentially could be teaching some of these 300 and 43 kids that are, I think, in the Shigarama school. So, you know, kind of 350 kids almost. And they're hoping to still grow that. Over the years, UPP has also done school sponsorships. Whether it's in the Shigarama school that's there, maybe into the local secondary school, but also for some being sponsored into university. And we've already touched a bit on the computer classrooms and how that's been, you know, sort of supported. So right now the computer lab, we've got set up with tables and a security cabinet. So, you know, some schools have had people break in and steal the computers and steal the electronics. So now these kids are actually learning in the classroom how to do something, even with the old computers that don't work, how to do keyboarding. So you got these 6, 7, 8, 10-year-olds, how to use a computer. So I have to admit, you know, how many of the older people didn't necessarily learn how to use computers, but here we've got kids at a young age, just like here, knowing how to use a keyboard, how to use computers. So that's going to be a skill that will certainly last them through. And sponsorships. We touched base with some of those. They're now adult, but years ago, Annika Barlow, back in 2010 for her high school graduation, she had gone there, and so she had done 10 for 10. So these are some of the, you know, kind of school students that they had been sponsored through school and then went on to do university. So Naus, she went on to do medical school. Unfortunately, as David mentioned, there was still some glitch, and now she has to do like a 1-year unpaid internship. So, you know, how to pay expenses and everything as you're sort of doing, you know, you can't really earn income because she's doing that 1-year internship. The middle fellow, Nimlord, he was sponsored through engineering, and so he has completed his engineering degree, but again, he now has to do further training to be able to actually work as an engineer. Next one over was Hamidou, and he was sponsored through business, but again, not able to get a job. That's actually his sister that we had mentioned earlier, Danielle. So she was somebody that UPP has just recently sponsored to have eye surgery. She was blind shortly after birth, and they're trying to improve the vision, but so she has just completed that. But that's again where some of the donations to UPP helped to fund her eye surgery recently. Bottom left, so that was Junia, and he had been, that's one of Ellie's sons, and so he had been sponsored through civil engineering diploma. And so again, kind of looking for work, but just, you know, unfortunately it's just not quite enough at this point. So that's kind of the older ones, but we're also then talking about, you know, some ongoing ones, and I think Jane is going to speak a bit more at the end here about sponsorship for some of the young kids coming through that are just, you know, just about to start school, including one of the little girls, Junik, that was sort of glued to Karis almost the entire time. As soon as you come in, it's like, Karis, 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 you know. So, I mean, so we saw her at Ellie's house a lot, and she's just going into school. Problem with sponsorship is you need to be ready to commit for years. So that, you know, if a child is coming in to do it for a year or two, and then to drop, you know, all of a sudden that's allowing them to go to school, and then suddenly they can't. So they're in a few years. I mean, some is better than nothing, but remembering if you're sponsoring, you'd want to be able to continue it until they're at least finished sort of through some years. So that could be anywhere from 3, 4 to even 7 or 8 years. But as I said, Jane's going to touch on that a bit more. I mentioned again about the computer classroom. So those tables in the middle, and then the other storage locker you saw, again, that was part of the funds that we went to Uganda with, this time funds from the UPP. Again, projects that you had been donating to, and it's just to say, yes, your contributions, this is what's being spent on. You know, here are the computer tables, we were there, and sort of the second last day that we were there. So this is now within 2 weeks, they had those tables there. They had that new steel lockers all set up. So just to say, those funds are being used, you know, this is where the funds have been used. And at this point, I'd like to invite up Jane for just one further comment and talk about the sponsorship and just also the
I'm back. That means we're nearing the end. And as David would say, keep it short. So I think you've got a good idea of what has been our trip, and we'll do a little rewrap and moving in a little bit. I was impressed with all the presentations and hearing the things that spoke to people's hearts. We actually haven't had a chance to get together and share what was the most impactful thing. So Desmond spoke briefly about changes in the school property and the buildings. Ellie is an amazing man. Ellie is somebody that David met over 30 years ago. And I think he had a hand up. Somebody helped him with electronic sponsorship for electronics, and he can do anything with any computer. But I also find that Ellie's a man of integrity, and he likes to help all kinds of people in the community. And this is why we've developed a close relationship with him. He's interested in allowing us to be a part of that. David, the reason that all these things have been able to happen from David's previous work, they carry on, and the foundation has been well laid. Pearl and Marvin have been a foundational part of the UPP, Uganda Possibility Project, through this church, and that will carry on. And Pearl and I like to dream, which is really good for Ellie, because Ellie's dreams, I don't think anyone can match Ellie's dreams. We have to kind of rein Ellie in a little bit, and the Ugandan or African way, be careful what you talk about, because talking about it is a promise. So I'm hoping that Ellie maybe doesn't see all the things that we're thinking of doing, because he'll expect them to happen. And then he makes them happen, which is wonderful. So in a moment, at the end of when I'm speaking, you'll hear from Pearl, a little bit of an update with that. And I would like to move on to talk about sponsorship. Sponsorship is so important. Ellie got his start on sponsorship over 30 years ago in his young 20s, and he's now 57. And sponsorship is something that I guess it's a little bit distant from some of us. Some of us are really involved with the children that we've been introduced to by mail or even email, video, that sort of thing. We've had pictures. But have you ever been able to go and see your sponsored child? And that was the biggest thing that impacted myself. 15 years ago, Des and I picked up a sponsored child, and her name is Mary. And remember that welcome that Karis talked about and that relationship? Well, I didn't get it. I knew that we were on the coattails of people like David and Ellie and all those previous members who had gone before us. But I didn't get why the people were so excited to see us. And it was like we had done something. And this carried on for us the whole trip. I came to understand it when I went to see our compassion child. Now, compassion is not part of the Uganda Possibilities, and it's not part of the Widow's Garden, but it was the key for me. On the second day of our trip, Mary, a girl that we have sponsored for 15 years, from the age of 3 to the age of almost 18, was brought to our hotel in Kampala, and we built a relationship with her. At the end of the trip, our bookend, we got to go to Mary's Compassion Project and to Mary's home. And the welcome was huge. I was missing the 7 teammates I'd been with, because now Desmond and I were the focus of this welcome and appreciation and gratitude. And I went, Desmond, it's like they think we did something wonderful. And maybe it's just their culture. So we had singing, we had dancing. Mary just about leapt into our arms because we'd met her, of course, 2 weeks before. And then we got to Mary's house. We were taken, small demonstration of appreciation was given. Then we got basket after basket after basket. But it was Mary's response to our sponsorship. So she's 18 now. She probably started school when she was 5 or so years old. We've had her since 3, which is another story. You don't usually get compassion children that old. And she spoke to that gratitude. So what Desmond and I have done is sponsored, I think it started at 40, but it's gone up over the years, and it's now $52 a month. And that sponsorship is needed to pay for school fees. Even public school is not free. You have to pay school fees. And so private school, so that you can have that slightly better education, costs $600 a year, but it's well worth it. From the extra that we sponsored, which was literally 100 to 150 a year at birthdays and Christmas, Mary's father allowed her to spend some of it, but he always added to the last piece of it and did something with it. Ellie's father was able to buy a calf. Took $40 from us and $40 from his pocket, which would have been hard saved, and he bought a calf. They raised up the calf became a cow, the cow sold for almost 4 times the price. From that money, he bought a plot of land, or I think he bought a plot of land at that point. When you have a plot of land, we understand, if you own it, you can plant coffee and banana. You would not want to plant coffee and banana if you don't own it, because the landlord will come and take that land back. So Ellie's father, Anastasia, bought land and planted coffee. And he didn't stop there. He's very community-minded. He reminded me of Ellie. When his coffee plants did well, he started to take cuttings and give them to the community members so that they, if they owned land, could also get ahead. Another time, they did buy goats. They had hope in the goats. Unfortunately, a goat was stolen and 1 goat died. So it's not always successful, but they always had hope and they always tried something. So I suddenly understood that what little we had done through sponsorship had multiplied. God had taken his hand and helped Anastasia to make it better than what we would ever offer. And that family, if you can see the house, and the team will recognize this, it's not just wattle and daub, it's not mud, it's brick, but it's been finished nicely. And he has 7 children living with him in that house. A lot of those people standing there are his family. And so we suddenly understood why we got this big thanks. So I can just imagine how those widows felt. Taken from poverty, same as his family, and allowed to prosper and even to help others. So I would love to encourage people to think about sponsorship. Compassion is a really good agency to go with. We saw our money arrive where it was supposed to. And we saw the thankfulness of the reverend in the community thanking us for what we'd done for the family and the community. And I finally got that bit. It wasn't what we had done. It's what we heard and what we offered, and God did it through other people. So up here are children from Ellie's Jiggerama School. Traditionally, we have sponsored children in primary, and we've been able to go back and visit them. A number of people in the audience here have actually got sponsored children there, and I want to thank you. You're making a huge difference. I will say that when I got these pictures from Ellie in the last couple of days, I went, those kids don't look really happy, but they don't understand the process yet. If you look at 2 of them, the second in from the right is Junik, and the second in from the left at the bottom is Nathan. And those kids know us, and they knew what sponsorship was going to be. So they are excited to think that they might be sponsored. I don't think the other kids know what was happening, but because these kids watched us and they know about the whiteboard, those white people are doing something for us. So this is going to be okay, whereas the other ones look a little bit hesitant and scared. So it will be about $600 a year. There are 340 children in the school, and presently only 12 are sponsored. Now Ellie, out of the excess of his coffee plantation and the other things he does, he puts a lot of those kids through school. A lot of these children are the widow's children. And without your help, it's not possible to put keep these 10 in school. Because some of them are there, not because their widow mom or grandma is able to afford it, but from the goodness of Ellie's heart. So I find that this is a really important way to support Ellie. And if we help support Ellie as we go forward with UPP, then these other project things will keep going. And just touch briefly on the building of a dormitory. That frees up 2 classrooms and allows that vocational school to happen. So sponsorship would go through to P7. Most of these kids can be anywhere from 5 to 12 years old, going into their first year of school. And you can make a difference, not just to that child, but to the family they come from. So I'm going to keep moving to make it short. So in conclusion, Africa. It's definitely a place to meet old friends, if you've been before, and to make new ones. And that was obvious, the relationship and the hospitality that we experienced along the way. I really felt we were benefiting from David's groundwork. And I do want to bring to attention the fellow on either end of those pictures is Emma. And Emma is somebody, I'm not sure how many people from the team took his phone number, but Des and I did. If we ever go back, Emma's our driver. The other people, one of the ladies there, Annette, Pippa Moore, and in fact, I think my stepmom was part of that too, had taken sewing machines or paid for sewing machines and set up a shop for Annette. And a lot of the response that we got from that shop was, I think there was 10 or 12 girls, young women, sewing there, and they were selling things. Some of the things that were sewn, so Pippa's influence, are the tapestries on the table that you can look at. So vocational school, tailoring, very important. And yeah, just the thanks that we got, because again, it was set up within the last 10 to 15, 20 years, and it's still going strong. Now, in ending, what would Africa, or a presentation on Africa, be without a few safari pictures? But I do want to encourage you that UPP right now, and it's not Africa, so I can dream, is hoping to continue going. I had gone 16 years ago, and I knew I would go back, and UPP and Widow's Garden helped make that happen. So think about it. There's usually always a safari. David's not going, but David never goes on safari anymore. He's seen enough. But it was a wonderful experience. And it was a great way to segue out of an impoverished area where we were welcome and well looked after, back into North American type society. Hot showers. Lots of animals. We spent 4 days on safari and it was fabulous. And it really was a great team building experience. So thank you, David. You're well appreciated. I didn't get to you till now. So, in a moment, we're going to have a movie, and then Pearl will come up and finish the presentation. But I just want to leave you with this thought. Uganda is known as the Pearl of Africa. And I think of that as where God's treasure is. And there's a verse in the Bible that says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure a man discovered in a field. In his excitement, he hid it again and sold everything he owned to get enough money to buy the land. And it's about that land and those widows being able to work that land that I think makes them the treasure that we all came to love. Go ahead, Tom.
Yep.
yetu Living Hope Church na makanisa gandi ya makanisa yetu na Wakristayo kandi abandi abatari Wakristayo abafite mkono.
We would like to also make a donation to this church. We would like to give 5 million.
Well, that was exciting. I'm Pearl Morin. I'm the project coordinator for the Uganda Possibilities Project here at Bay Community Church. Thank you very much for each of you. Thank you for going. Thank you for all that you did while you were there. And thank you for sharing with so much heart for all of us to hear. Thank you also for those who have gone before that are here. But even more than that, if any of these people that you've been seeing in the pictures were here, the widows, the children, people that were given medical treatment, if they were here, they would say, "Webbery, Webbery, Webbery," and they would be jumping and dancing and hugging. And so, to each one of you at Bay Community Church, and to Pastor David, who has very faithfully supported this ongoing, thank you very much. This is a very grassroots ministry where each thing that each one of you has done does make a difference. So thank you for your prayers. Do you notice that all of them got there and back? They're not sick and they're safe. That doesn't always happen. So thank you for your prayers. Thank you for how you've supported various projects at various times. And if different opportunities have touched your heart, there's opportunities to keep going. There will be opportunities to continue to bring on new widows or to increase their microfinancing. Jane was hinting towards sponsorship. I believe there's quite a display over here that she didn't mention, which is $50 a month there, or maybe you caught the vision of vocational training. So up till now, we've been supporting children going up to grade 7, but in this community, there's very little economy. And so you have education, but no way to bring in finances. So the next step is some vocational training, so they were hinting towards building buildings. There is already a teacher who can teach sewing. You could start with a sewing machine. There's 2 sewing machines there, but we need some more. They're like $200 each. Or Dave was telling us lots of the other trades that you could be cooperating with. Or maybe more than that, this will be you next year. There are already 3 people who are interested in going again. 2 of them are sponsors of the students you've seen. So there's all kinds of possibilities, that's why it's the Possibilities Project. But thank you very much.